So let's now discuss our last ethical theory. Now, we've gone through four of them already: the Kantianism, act utilitarianism, rule utilitarianism, and social contract theory. Now we're going to talk about the last one, which is known as virtue ethics theory. So the critique of those Enlightenment theories is that Kantianism, utilitarianism, social contract theory actually ignore some important moral considerations. They ignore moral education, moral wisdom, family and social relationships, and the role of emotions. But with virtue ethics, we take into account things such as virtues, excellence, reaching the highest potential. And if we look at Aristotle, Aristotle claimed that the path to true happiness and genuine flourishing as a human being lies actually in the living a life of virtue. So there's two types of virtues. One is known as intellectual virtue, and the other is known as a moral virtue. Intellectual virtue are virtues that are associated with reasoning and truth. A moral virtue is virtues that are of character, honesty, for example. With moral virtues, they're developed by habitually performing the right action. These are deep-seated character traits and the disposition to act in a certain way and feel in a certain way. So here's a little cartoon about Aristotle happiness approach, where in this case, happiness is derived from living a life of virtue, helping to feed the hungry, doing the things that will essentially benefit others and that we don't think as much about in terms of how it's impacting us, just because it's the right thing to do. So the summary of virtue ethics is that a right action is going to be an action that a virtuous person acting in character would do in the same circumstances. So a virtuous person is a person who actually possesses and lives out those virtues. The virtues are those character traits human beings need in order to flourish and truly be happy. We do need to talk about vices, though. Vices are actually the opposite of virtues. Vice is actually a character trait that prevents a human being from flourishing or being truly happy. And often a virtue is situated between two vices. So courage, for example, between cowardliness and rashness. Generosity, between stinginess and prodigality. So let's talk about a scenario. So what I'd like you to do is spend a couple minutes, read through the scenario, and then put your opinion in the Google form that I've attached in the module. And when everybody in the class has incorporated all of their comments, I'll post the individual responses and we can then discuss it. So if you haven't been able to read the entire scenario, you can go back and hit pause on the video. But the question here is, what should Josh do? Obviously, Matt and Josh are good friends, and Josh has a decision to make about what he believes the right thing to do. So what I'd like you to do is put in that Google form what you think Josh should do. What would you do in that situation? It's all about virtue ethics. So the case for virtue ethics is that it often makes more sense to focus on virtues than obligations, rights, or consequences. Personal relationships can actually be morally relevant to decision making. The theory recognizes our moral decision making skills that we develop over time. With this theory, there are no irresolvable moral dilemmas, and that emotions play an important role in living a moral life. The case against virtue ethics is that reasonable people actually may disagree on those character traits needed for human flourishing. You can't use virtue ethics to guide government policy. Virtue ethics undermines attempts to hold people responsible for their bad actions. The conclusion is that despite weaknesses here as well, virtue ethics is a workable theory. So now that we've gone through all 5 key ethical theories, we'll go through a summary and how you can compare each of the different 5 ethical theories.